Welcome to another episode of Hello World Japan. Today we're doing a deep dive into this really interesting stack of sources you've shared, all focused on something I think many of us find incredibly rewarding, learning Japanese. And let's be honest, when you first look at it, those unique writing systems, the grammar, the
Yeah.
cultural links, it can feel, well, pretty daunting.
Oh, absolutely. It can seem like a huge mountain to climb. But what's fascinating, what these sources really highlight, is how much language learning itself, particularly for Japanese, has, evolved. We've moved quite a bit beyond just, say, rote memorization or old school classroom drills.
Right.
Modern approaches are much more informed by decades of research, actual science, and second language acquisition, SLA, and they're supercharged by technology now, too.
Exactly. So our mission today in this deep dive is basically to cut through some of that noise. We want to unpack the really important nuggets from all this research to help you understand the why behind the techniques that actually work. And, most importantly, how you can take that understanding and optimize your own journey towards fluency.
It's about making smart choices, right?
Precisely. We'll dig into the foundational stuff first, like how do we even learn languages? What actually happens in our brains? Then we'll look specifically at adult learners, the advantages we bring, but also the unique challenges. And then, yeah, break down the core linguistic bits, tackling the writing, getting a handle on grammar, and trying to nail that pronunciation.
And then the really modern stuff, digging into tools and concepts like comprehensible input, spaced repetition systems, SRS, which seem like magic sometimes. We'll also touch on where tech like AI and VR fits into the picture now.
And crucially, the psychological side. How do you stay motivated? How do you keep going when it gets tough? Because it does get tough. It really does. Okay, let's unpack that first part then. Before diving into specific Japanese methods, you mentioned the sources emphasize understanding how we learn languages fundamentally. Why start there?
Well, it's foundational, isn't it? The SLA research gives us the principles. Instead of just guessing or following fads, we can actually lean on decades of study about what works. A really core idea, for instance, is Stephen Krashen's comprehensible input hypothesis. You hear about this a lot.
CI, right. What's the gist of that?
The really powerful insight there is that language is mostly acquired. That means you pick it up naturally, almost subconsciously. And you do that primarily by understanding messages, listening, and reading stuff that makes sense to you, but is just a little bit beyond your current level. Krashen called it I+1.
I+1, okay.
Yeah. And it works best when you're relaxed, focused on the meaning of what you're hearing or reading, not stressing about analyzing every single grammatical rule. It's seen as like a primary engine for getting fluent.
Okay, so absorbing meaning, that's key. But surely you have to actually use the language too. Speak it, write it.
Oh, absolutely. That's where other theories come in, like Merrill Swain's output hypothesis. So while input is like the fuel, producing language, actually trying to speak or write, forces you to notice what you don't know yet.
Okay.
It makes you aware of gaps in your knowledge, helps you test out grammar rules you think you know, and basically refine your accuracy and fluency over time. And the sources mentioned, yeah, getting feedback on that output is part of making it effective.
And what about just talking with people, the interaction itself?
Yeah, that links directly to Michael Long's interaction hypothesis. His point was that real, meaningful conversation, where you and the other person might have to work a bit to understand each other. Maybe you ask them to repeat something, or they rephrase it for you. That process actually makes the language input you receive much clearer, more comprehensible.
Makes sense.
It really underscores why things like conversation practice or language exchange are so valuable.
I also saw sociocultural theory mentioned. How does that piece fit in?
Right? That comes from Vygotsky. It's a reminder that language isn't just this abstract system inside your head. It's deeply social, deeply cultural. Learning Japanese isn't just learning words and grammar. It's learning how to participate in the culture, understand the context, connect to the community that uses it.
And Krashen, again, quickly, the affective filter. That sounds important.
It really is. This focuses on the emotional side of learning. Things like feeling really anxious, lacking confidence, or just not being motivated. These can create a kind of mental barrier, a filter, that literally blocks the input from getting processed properly.
Wow, okay.
So the big takeaway is that a learning environment where you feel comfortable, supported, and not overly stressed is crucial for acquisition to actually happen. Low anxiety is key.
And cognitive theory. That sounds more like the active brain work.
Exactly. This perspective focuses more on the conscious mental processes. It sees learners as active participants, analyzing patterns in the language, forming hypotheses about how things work, and consciously using strategies to help themselves learn.
Like mnemonics for kanji. Or using SRS tools.
Precisely. Those kinds of deliberate strategies fit well within a cognitive view of learning.
So, pulling all these theories together, it sounds like the research isn't pointing to just one single magic bullet. It's more about learning that's focused on meaning, involves communication, happens in a good context.
And it's active.
Right. Active. Definitely a shift from just, memorizing verb charts in isolation.
Definitely. And when you think about adults learning Japanese, this framework is super relevant because we bring strengths, right? Our developed cognitive abilities mean we can grasp abstract grammar concepts maybe more easily than kids. And we already have a first language, which can be a resource. We can make comparisons, use analytical skills.
But that first language can trip us up too, can't it? Pronunciation is often harder for adults, sometimes linked to that critical period hypothesis idea.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's the risk of fossilization, where certain errors just get stuck and become really hard to fix.
That brings up a really important question that sources grapple with, especially for adult, often self-directed learners. If adults are good at conscious learning and thinking about how they learn, metacognition is just relying on subconscious acquisition, like pure CI, enough. Or is it the most efficient way?
What do the sources suggest?
The consensus seems to lean towards a blend, a synergy. CI is absolutely vital for building that intuitive feel for the language. But adults can strategically boost their progress by consciously adding things in, like targeted grammar review to understand patterns they're noticing in their input, or using SRS for efficient vocabulary building. The goal is to become an effective self-directed learner, using these research-backed tools intelligently.
So you're not just passively receiving, you're actively shaping the learning process.
Exactly. And regarding pronunciation, that critical period idea, whether it's strictly true or not, implies that adults probably shouldn't just wait and hope their pronunciation gets better on its own.
They need to be proactive.
Yes. Tackle it deliberately from the start. Dedicated practice, maybe studying the sounds, really listening and mimicking, using tools that give feedback seems essential for adults.
Okay, that framework is really helpful. So with that in mind, let's get practical. Let's talk about the building blocks. The writing systems, grammar, pronunciation. For Japanese, that means starting with kana and kanji.
Right. And the kana, hiragana, and katakana, they're absolutely the first step, non-negotiable. They're phonetic, basically alphabets, where each symbol is a sound or mora. You just can't read anything without them.
And modern methods make learning them pretty efficient now, don't they? Like using mnemonics. I remember learning ki by thinking it looked like a key.
Exactly. Resources like Tofugu's guides online or apps like Dr. Moku or Mochikana, they lean heavily into those visual mnemonics. Makes it much faster than just rote drilling. And this raises an interesting point the sources touch on. How much time should you spend practicing writing kana by hand initially?
What's the thinking there?
Well, the sources seem to favor a more pragmatic reading priority approach. Learning to recognize and read kana quickly is often faster. And critically, it unlocks typing in Japanese and lets you access beginner reading material much, much sooner. That early access is super motivating and gets you started with comprehensible input right away.
That makes a lot of sense, especially now with everything being digital. Okay, then the big one, kanji. The character is borrowed from Chinese. This feels like the main event for many learners needing, over 2,000 for general literacy?
Yeah, it's a significant investment, no doubt. And this is where spaced repetition systems, SRS, become absolutely essential for most people. Tools like Anki or Wanakani or others like Mochikanji, they're based on the science of memory, the forgetting curve. They schedule reviews right when you're about to forget something.
Making memorization way more efficient than just cramming.
Exactly. Much more efficient.
Anki seems really powerful because you can customize it endlessly, put anything in it. But it requires discipline, right? You have to make your own cards, stick to the reviews.
It does demand self-direction. Wanakani, on the other hand, offers a very structured, pre-made path. It teaches you radicals, first the building blocks, then kanji, using those radicals, and then vocabulary words that use those kanji,
Right.
often with its own built-in mnemonics.
Right.
And the sources bring up an important distinction in kanji learning approaches. There's the Heisig method, for example, which focuses initially just on recognizing the kanji shape and learning its core English meaning. You delay learning the readings and vocabulary.
Okay.
Then there's the vocabulary integrated approach. This is where you learn kanji as part of actual Japanese words.
So you learn the character and how it's read and a word it's used in all together.
Pretty much, yes. And the big advantage, according to the sources favoring this, is that it allows you to start reading actual Japanese sentences and texts much faster.
Because you're learning words, not just isolated characters.
Precisely. And getting to real reading sooner means more comprehensible input, which can accelerate your overall progress. Wanakani kind of does a bit of both, teaching radicals, then kanji, then vocab. So your choice of kanji strategy really impacts your whole reading journey.
Okay, moving on to grammar. Japanese grammar can feel like, well, turning English inside out sometimes, that subject-object-verb order, the particles doing all sorts of work, and then the politeness levels, keigo. That's a lot.
It definitely requires a different way of thinking for English speakers. The sources generally recommend a systematic approach here. Using structured resources is key initially. Textbooks like Genki or Minna no Nihongo are popular choices that lay things out step by step. Online guides like Take Him's Grammar Guide are also really comprehensive.
I've heard some people in the pure CI camp argue against studying grammar explicitly, saying it gets in the way of fluency.
Yeah, there's definitely that perspective. The idea is that you should just acquire grammar naturally, through massive input, like you did with your first language. However, many sources, and frankly many adult learners, find that having some explicit understanding is incredibly helpful, especially for adults who are good at analytical thinking.
It gives you a framework.
Exactly. It provides a framework, a lens, to help you make sense of the input you're receiving. It helps you notice patterns. The key seems to be balance. Grammar study shouldn't replace getting tons of input and practice.
But it can support it.
It should support it, clarify things, help you understand why things are said a certain way.
Okay, so you learn the rule from a book or website. But how do you make it stick? How do you internalize it so you can actually use it without thinking too hard?
Reinforcement is absolutely key. You need to encounter and use the grammar in context. SRS can be used for grammar, too. Platforms like BunPro are specifically designed for this. They drill grammar points with example sentences, often tied to JLPT levels.
JLPT being the proficiency test, right?
Right, the Japanese language proficiency test, a common benchmark. Another powerful technique mentioned is keeping a grammar journal and writing your own example sentences.
Ah, that sounds like the output hypothesis again. Actively using it.
Exactly. It forces you to retrieve the grammar rule and apply it. And then, of course, trying to use the grammar when you write emails, messages, or when you speak with tutors or language partners. That real-world application solidifies it.
Okay, last of the building blocks. Pronunciation and listening. This seems to be a persistent challenge, especially for adult learners trying to sound natural.
It really is. But again, targeted strategies can make a huge difference. One fascinating aspect the sources highlight is the rhythm of Japanese. English is stress-timed. Some syllables get more emphasis, are longer or louder. Japanese is generally described as mora-timed.
Mora-timed.
Yeah. Each moria, which is roughly a sound unit like ka or shi or the in sound, or even the little pause created by the small tu, gets approximately equal timing, equal duration. Nailing this rhythm is a big part of sounding less foreign.
And you absolutely have to watch out for interference from English habits, right?
Oh, definitely. The sources list several common pitfalls for English speakers. Vowel length is a huge one. The difference between obasan, aunt, and obasan, grandmother, is just holding that A sound slightly longer, but it changes the meaning entirely.
Crucial difference.
Absolutely. Another is adding extra vowels to loan words like saying hamu for ham, applying English stress patterns where they don't belong. The Japanese R sound, it's not like ours. It's more of a light flap, like the T in the American way of saying butter.
Right.
The small tsu indicates a slight pause or a glottal stop before doubling the next consonant sound, like in kippo.
Ticket.
Particle pronunciation, the topic marker R is pronounced wa, not ha, and treating vowel combinations like I as a single English diphthong instead of two distinct sounds, E then I.
Okay, so the message is, be aware of these specific English habits, listen really carefully to native speakers, mimic them, and maybe use tools that can analyze your speech or get feedback from a tutor.
Exactly. Active listening and targeted practice are key.
Okay, we've covered the foundations. Now let's dive deeper into the modern methodologies and the tech that's available. We keep coming back to comprehensible input, CI. We know the theory input's slightly above your level. How do you actually do that effectively today?
Right. CI is often presented as, like, a revolutionary approach for many learners. The basic strategy is simple. Find Japanese content you can understand most of, say 80% or more, and just consume tons of it. Listen, read, watch. The sources suggest that this kind of focused input can be incredibly powerful, especially for building vocabulary almost effortlessly and developing that intuitive feel for grammar.
But is it really enough on its own? Can you just watch anime all day and become fluent?
Well, that's where the nuance comes in, and the sources reflect this debate. Some really strong CI proponents advocate for almost exclusively using CI. However, a more balanced view presented is that having some foundational knowledge actually makes more input comprehensible, especially early on. If you know your kana, if you have a basic grasp of sentence structure, you can understand more complex input sooner.
So maybe using other tools like SRS for vocab or some basic grammar study can actually help your CI strategy be more effective.
That seems to be a practical takeaway for many adults, yes. Using targeted study to lower the barrier to understanding more authentic materials.
Okay, so where do you find good CI materials specifically for learners?
There are dedicated platforms now. Comprehensible Japanese is one highlighted, offering loads of videos made specifically for learners, slow, clear speech, lots of visuals, repetition, transcripts available, all sorted by level. The key is to watch for the main meaning, not get bogged down trying to understand every single word.
What else works?
Lots of things. Certain YouTube channels cater specifically to learners with simplified Japanese. Graded readers are books written at specific vocabulary and grammar levels. The Satori Reader app is a digital example. Story listening, where someone tells a story simply with visual aids. Simplified news, like NHK News Web Easy.
Even using stuff you already know.
Yeah, like kids' shows where the language is simpler, or maybe watching a movie you know well in English but with the Japanese dub.
The familiarity helps you follow along. The main thing is finding content where you can genuinely follow the gist without constantly hitting a wall of confusion. And developing the skill to find and judge materials for yourself is crucial for a self-directed learner.
Makes sense. Beyond just input, there's this broader idea of immersion.
Immersion is absolutely vital. But the sources make a really important point. Immersion isn't just about physically being in Japan. They give examples of students who lived there but barely improved because they stayed in an English bubble outside of class.
Effective immersion is a conscious choice, a strategic effort to maximize your engagement with Japanese in your daily life, wherever you happen to be.
So it's about creating your own Japanese environment, like changing your phone's language setting, watching Japanese TV shows, maybe with Japanese subtitles. Once you're able, listening to J-pop or podcasts.
Exactly. It's about active engagement, not just having Japanese music playing vaguely in the background while you do something else. Though even that might help with rhythm and sounds. Consistency is huge here. Building small daily habits of interaction, reading a news article, watching a short video, reviewing flashcards is way more effective than trying to cram for hours once a week.
And finding stuff you actually like.
Yes. That intrinsic motivation is key. If you're immersing yourself in topics you find genuinely interesting, it doesn't feel like a chore.
Okay, and technology is playing a bigger and bigger role. What about AI? How's that changing things?
AI is definitely a hot topic in the sources. AI-powered tutors can offer personalized learning plans, provide targeted drills for grammar or vocabulary, and chatbots can simulate conversations for practice. A big plus is the immediate feedback they often provide. You make a mistake, the AI might point it out right away. This can accelerate learning certain things.
But can AI actually replace talking to a real person, a tutor or a language partner?
The consensus in the sources seems to be, not yet. AI is incredibly powerful as a supplement. Its strengths are in structured practice, endless patience for drills, and adapting to your level for specific skills. But it generally lacks the cultural nuance, the spontaneity, the ability to understand context deeply, and frankly, the human connection you get from interacting with another person. A human tutor brings life experience and cultural insights AI just can't replicate currently.
Got it. What about language learning apps? There are just so many out there.
There really are. The sources compare several common ones. Rocket Languages and Pim's Lyra are mentioned as being quite comprehensive, often audio-focused. Rosetta Stone uses visual immersion. Lingopie focuses on learning through TV shows and movies. Mondly and Duolingo are known for their gamified approach, especially for beginners.
So which one is the best?
That's the million-dollar question. And the answer from the sources is pretty clear. There is no single best app for everyone. It's incredibly subjective. It depends entirely on your learning style, your specific goals. Are you focused on travel phrases or deep grammar, your current level, and honestly, what you find engaging?
So mixing and matching might be the way to go.
Often, yes. Many learners find success using a combination of tools, maybe an app for kanji with SRS, another for listening practice through stories, and then using something like italki for speaking practice with a tutor. It's about building your personal toolkit.
You mentioned gamification apps like Duolingo use points, streaks, leaderboards. Does that stuff actually help you learn Japanese long term?
It can definitely be a motivator, especially when you're starting out or need a push. The sources acknowledge that gamification using game mechanics can boost engagement, make practice feel less tedious, potentially improve memory retention through rewards, and even lower anxiety by making it feel like a low-stakes game.
But there are downsides.
There can be. The novelty might wear off. For some people, the competitive aspect of leaderboards can actually be demotivating if they feel they're falling behind. And perhaps the biggest caution is the risk of superficial learning, focusing more on winning points or maintaining a streak than on actually understanding and being able to use the language meaningfully. Gamification works best when it supports genuine linguistic goals and intrinsic motivation, not when it replaces them.
Interesting balance. Okay, one more technology. VR, virtual reality for language learning, stepping into virtual Japan.
Yeah, this is a really exciting area. Platforms like Dynamic Languages are mentioned, using 360-degree videos to put you in realistic scenarios. Imagine virtually being in a Japanese convenience store or restaurant, having to navigate the situation, order food, ask for things, often with speech recognition to check if you're saying things correctly.
Wow, that sounds intense but useful.
What's potentially really powerful here, according to the sources, is its ability to lower speaking anxiety. You get to practice real-world interactions in a safe, controlled environment before you have to do it for real. It helps bridge that gap between textbook dialogues and the messy reality of spontaneous conversation. It ties right back into lowering that affective filter we talked about.
Okay, so we have all these theories, building blocks, tools, technologies, but learning Japanese, it's a long game, right? A marathon. How do you actually sustain the momentum over months, even years?
This psychological aspect is absolutely crucial, and the sources really emphasize it. Intrinsic motivation is paramount. You need to connect your learning to something you genuinely care about. Is it understanding anime without subtitles? Traveling confidently? Connecting with Japanese friends or family? Reading novels? That internal drive is what will keep you going when things get hard, especially if you're mostly studying on your own.
And consistency over intensity seems to be a recurring theme.
Absolutely. The sources strongly advocate for building habits. Short, regular study sessions, even just 15–30 minutes a day, are far more sustainable and effective in the long run than trying to cram for hours sporadically whenever motivation strikes. Turning learning into a routine, something you just do, like brushing your teeth, makes it less dependent on willpower. Setting clear, achievable goals is also vital. It gives you direction and a sense of progress. Maybe it's passing a certain JLPT level, or being able to hold a 5-minute conversation on a specific topic, or reading your first simple manga. Having those milestones helps you see how far you've come.
Okay, but what happens when you hit that wall, that infamous intermediate plateau where it feels like you're putting in the effort but just not improving anymore?
Ah, the plateau. It's very real. The key insight from the sources here is that breaking through often requires changing what you're doing, not doing more of the same things that got you there.
So shaking things up.
Exactly. It might mean varying your study methods, setting new and different kinds of goals, or, very importantly, pushing yourself into more active language use. Things that really challenge you. This is where refining your reading and listening skills becomes crucial. Differentiating between intensive reading, where you go slow, look up everything, really analyze the language to learn new things, and extensive reading more quickly for overall understanding, building fluency, learning to infer meaning. You need both.
Same idea for listening.
Yes. Active listening, where you might listen to a challenging podcast segment multiple times, trying to catch every detail, versus more passive or extensive listening, maybe just having native radio or TV on to get used to the natural speed and rhythm, even if you don't understand everything. You also need to make sure your materials are evolving with you. Moving on to textbooks, written entirely in Japanese, tackling authentic news articles, maybe starting with simplified ones, reading manga aimed at native speakers, perhaps using ones with furigana, the small kana readings next to kanji.
Diversifying the input.
Right. And maintaining patience. Progress is naturally slower and less obvious at higher levels than it was at the beginning. Breaking plateaus is fundamentally about learning to handle more complex, nuanced, and authentic language.
And interaction plays a big role here too, right? Actually using the language with people seems critical for getting past that stage.
Definitely. It connects back to the interaction hypothesis and the output hypothesis. Finding ways to communicate is key. Online tutors, through platforms like italki, can provide personalized feedback, target your weak points, and offer crucial cultural insights that self-study often misses. Language exchange partners, found through apps like HelloTalk or Tandem, or maybe local conversation groups, offer practice in authentic, spontaneous conversation. The focus should be on trying to communicate effectively, negotiating meaning, even if your grammar isn't perfect.
But finding good partners and having productive exchanges takes effort, doesn't it?
It does. The sources acknowledge that while platforms make it easy to connect, meaningful interaction requires you to be proactive. You need to set expectations, find partners who share your goals, and actively steer conversations towards topics that push your abilities. But the very act of attempting to produce language speaking or writing is incredibly valuable. It forces your brain to retrieve information, construct sentences, and immediately highlights what you can and can't yet do. Getting feedback on that output then closes the learning loop.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, let's quickly revisit some of those specific challenges that English speakers often face when learning Japanese, based on what we've discussed from the sources. What are the big hurdles to be aware of?
Well, beyond the obvious challenge of mastering the writing systems, kana, and especially kanji grammar, is a huge one. That subject-object-verb sentence structure feels backward. Particles like wa, ye, ni, o, or ni are essential but tricky. The politeness system, kaigo, is complex and deeply tied to social context, and the way Japanese often omits subjects and objects takes getting used to.
And pronunciation pitfalls.
Yes, those specific points we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Getting vowel lengths right, mastering the Japanese R sound, avoiding adding extra vowels to loanwords, not imposing English stress pattern.
Vocabulary issues, too.
Vocabulary has its own challenges. Lots of homophones, words that sound the same but mean different things. The counter system for counting different types of objects, idiomatic expressions that don't translate directly, and even pronouns are used very differently than in English. And maybe the most crucial point underlying many of these challenges, cultural context. Japanese communication styles often rely heavily on indirectness, understanding social hierarchy, which influences keiko, and navigating concepts like uchi in-group versus soto out-group.
So learning the culture isn't just an optional extra.
Not at all. The sources emphasize that understanding the culture is integral to achieving true communicative competence and avoiding misunderstandings. You really need resources and learning methods that integrate cultural learning alongside the language itself.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a deep dive. It's really clear that the modern path to Japanese fluency isn't about finding one secret method. It's much more about weaving together different strands.
Absolutely. It's about building that solid foundation, getting your kana down, having a smart strategy for kanji, using tools like SRS, understanding the basic grammar framework, and using that foundation to engage with the language in a meaning-focused way.
And comprehensible input seems absolutely central to that acquisition process, boosted by consciously creating an immersive environment in your everyday life.
Right. And technology, SRs for memory, AI tutors for practice, diverse apps for different skills, even VR for simulation. These are incredibly powerful supplements, but they need to be used strategically to support those core learning principles.
But none of it works without paying attention to yourself, right? Your motivation, building those consistent habits, setting goals you care about, and finding ways to push through when you inevitably get stuck.
Exactly. And seeking out interaction, real communication with other people, is irreplaceable for actually learning to use the language effectively. So at the end of the day, the sources strongly suggest that the most effective path is going to be a personalized one. It's about understanding this whole range of tools and theories and then intelligently picking and mixing the ones that fit your learning style, your goals, and what keeps you engaged and moving forward.
It sounds like becoming an informed meta-learner, someone who understands why different methods work and can flexibly combine them, is really the ultimate modern strategy here.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's about taking control, managing your own learning environment to make the journey sustainable, efficient, and hopefully really enjoyable and rewarding.
So, reflecting on everything we've unpacked from these sources, all these tools, insights, strategies, what one aspect of your own Japanese learning journey will you listening choose to optimize or maybe rethink starting today? Thank you.